Welcome back, everyone. I cannot believe that I'm actually saying this, but this is our season finale. It feels like
Yay.
literally yesterday we were talking about maybe doing a podcast and how that's a wild idea. And now we're 13 episodes in. So we're going to take a little break for the summer, but we wanted to do a bit of a wrap up of kind of what we accomplished this season, maybe some of the highlights,
hmm
biggest takeaways and learnings. So stick around, and at the end, we'll talk about what's to come next.
Sounds good.
This is the AI Therapy Podcast, where we discuss mindful use of AI for self help. A consumer insights nerd and a techie are joined by a practicing psychologist to unpack when AI can be helpful, where it shouldn't be used, and best ways to interact with AI to get the support you need. AI Therapy Podcast: practical tools, real talk, and a mindful take on technology. So if you've been with us for at least a couple of episodes, what you'll know is that we start each episode with kind of like a hard stat to really
hmm
understand why we're
Set
talking about the yeah, set the mood.
set the mood, give some context. Yeah.
So we wanted to bring a couple of those stats back today because ultimately some of these numbers are really one of the reasons why we started this podcast in the first place, kind of why this whole idea was born.
hmm
Mm. So the one that stood out to me that I want to bring back is it's about, let me look at my notes, 280 million people worldwide experience depression. And the sad part of that, while it's a huge number, the sad part is only half of that get treatment, right? And we've talked about why that is, and that will really apply to a lot of the stats here. But it's like wait times, resources, and just lack of access,
Accessibility.
yeah, to
Yeah.
care. Exactly. So to me, that's still kind of one of the reasons like why we're doing this, why I keep
hmm
reminding myself why we do this and produce
Right.
this content.
That was just depression. If you guys recall, we also talked about other things such as 360 million people have anxiety disorder. And it's crazy, but it's like one of the most treatable conditions in all of psychology, but yet only about three-quarters of people with it actually never get treated. So
Yeah.
it just sounds so crazy and bizarre.
That was actually one of my favorite episodes, I think, when we talked about anxiety and kind of went through the prompt. So if you haven't listened, please do. But yeah, that one I think was really mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, folks. I mean, those numbers, they're so disappointing in terms of knowing how much help is out there. And I mean, this is not to minimize the difficult and challenges and barriers folks have in terms of accessing therapy, both internal and external factors. But as Eric said, I mean, a lot of those conditions are treatable. Folks can live a better quality of life. So it's really sad to hear that, quite often this help is not pursued even though it's within reach. Another issue we spoke about were relational issues in
Right.
which AI was surprisingly also helpful. For example, quite often stats show that couples go on average through 6 years of relational distress prior to seeking help. And I mean, by the time I quite often see them in my office, the patterns are really deeply entrenched. There has been so much of disconnect, misattunement, and unsafety developed with each other in the relationship that the work becomes very difficult.
Okay, I take that back. I think that was my favorite episode, the
Mm.
relationship, and based on what I heard from all of you, sounds like it was for many of you too. I think that episode was phenomenal. Also because, some of us may have anxiety or depression or experienced it in the past, but everyone has a relationship and everyone has a relationship loop, whether it's with your partner or your mom or your neighbor. It doesn't matter with who in it. Found it so, so helpful. So yeah, so as we said before, those numbers are essentially why we started this podcast, why it exists. And it's not because AI is the answer. The reason, like the truth is people are already using AI, right? So
100%.
so they deserve to know how to use it well and properly and in a ways that will actually fit them.
Right. And I think one of those anchoring questions we had when we came up with this and we were starting to think about it was, can AI help? ultimately. That was like what we kept on thinking about. So we went through so many episodes, and I think, from my recollection, it wasn't like a hard yes or no. It's kind of, it depends. But I think this is where we should kind of do a bit of a wrap up Nate, I'm going to put you on the spot and
Yeah,
say
people
like,
care. They don't care what we think. People care
and
what
who are
Nate
we?
thinks.
We're like, we're not a psychologist,
Oh,
but Nate, what do you think? What's your verdict on this after doing so many episodes?
I mean, to be honest with you, this has been such a fascinating journey. I was pleasantly surprised about how much AI can actually help. For example, the relational issues episode was really surprising based on the strength of the prompt that we've generated and the feedback we've got from folks, from some of the listeners, from people in our social circles, and also the research that we've done really was very convincing, right? So overall, I found that AI can be really helpful as a self-help tool. I think we've been very careful to position it as such throughout all 13 episodes. It's not a replacement for therapy, but for folks who are not in therapy due to a lack of resources or other barriers, including stigma about therapy, or not feeling safe to start talking even in therapy, AI can be very helpful self-help tool, right? And even for folks in therapy, including my current clients, for example, quite often I hear from them using it in between sessions to supplement sessions. Sometimes they do some reflective work, for
Mhm,
example, which
mhm.
AI is so good with prior to coming back to therapy. So very helpful. That said, once again, the concerns that we identified in the beginning, they're still there. Sycophancy aspect of AI is very much there and is not going away.
Right.
So unless we do, and that's why we've spent so much time talking about it in prompts, asking AI to talk to us in a specific
Right.
way, to not just reaffirm our thoughts, to be validating, but also encourage reflection and healthy self-questioning, for example, right? Including in relational type of reflections.
Well, there you have it, folks. Use it, but smartly, thoughtfully, with caution, which I guess is kind of how you do it with everything else.
It's
Right.
sort of our motto, right, on this podcast.
Exactly, exactly. But actually, that sets us up really well for the next thing we wanted to cover, as Nate was talking about giving it a role and guidance.
Hmm.
I think one of the biggest things, like if you've been listening, you probably got a solid crash course in prompt writing. In fact, I've been talking to some of my friends who've been listening, and they use our guidance to build completely non-therapy related
That's
prompts.
okay. They learned.
So it's been a full crash course around how do you build a structured, solid, foolproof prompt. Should we like do a quick maybe call out of like what are the main
Some
rules?
highlights, yeah.
Yeah, Harry, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think you already alluded to a little bit of this, but I think one of the things we learned about, and we always have it in our prompts, is to ensure you assign a specific role. So if you don't do that, you're going to get some generic answers which don't really help you very
Right,
well.
right.
So in our case, you can say something more like act as a psychoeducator and self-help companion, or things like relationship consultant
Right.
versus
A guide or we talked about. Yeah, yeah,
something like, if
yeah.
you can give it more specifics, they'll be able to give you a bit more depth following that persona, so then it can really act and behave as what you've decided for it. So then it'll really try to fit into that role and give you the answers and information accordingly.
Okay, so
Which,
role. Assign a
yeah,
role, a
yeah,
clear
which does
role.
things much better. And if you don't, like I said, you get generic and you don't get as great of an answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Nate,
And talking about generic, I very much agree with you, Eric. Not just assigning the role, but also quite often specifying the framework or approach to therapy. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy, or acceptance and commitment therapy, or psychodynamic, or emotionally focused, etc. right? And for folks who are not familiar with particular frameworks, who haven't done therapy, for example, you can actually ask AI to help you come up with one.
Mhm, mhm.
So, for example, you can discuss with AI, describe your presenting issue, saying I'm suffering with from depression. These are briefly my sort of circumstances. This is the context of my life. Ask me any question. So you can actually tell AI, write a prompt that says, ask me any questions to determine what would be the best approach that I can use as a
Mm,
self-help
mm.
tool with AI. And AI will tell you, you know what, for depression, a cognitive behavioral therapy might be
That's a great
helpful.
idea, that's a great
Yeah,
tip.
yeah.
That's very smart, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, you got one?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we kinda talked about it, so we said the first one we said was role,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then Nate said, like, use a
Framework.
framework,
Mhm.
and then I think boundaries, right? Like, so setting those boundaries up front. You were talking about, "You're my guide, you're my consultant," right? Which is also, like, on the flip side of that, the boundary is like, "You're not my therapist.
Right.
So do not tell me, do not be prescriptive, do not put a label on my partner. If I'm describing a crisis or abuse, you need to stop conversing with me and direct me to a health professional, right? To a human." So I think those boundaries are kind of the flip side of the role that we've described.
And I think somewhat similar to boundaries, if you want to call it that, is like writing in information around failure modes. So what I mean is like Mush, I named one for instance. Don't never label my partner if there's a situation you're talking about your partner, or don't minimize my feelings if I express it to you. I never promise that these tools will fix me. Like, 'cause you
Right,
got to say these
right.
type of things up front, so it's not gonna use those type of phrasing and really skew your thoughts in a dark and
Yeah,
unuseful way,
yeah.
mainly.
Did
Yeah.
we cover all of them? Anything else?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One more, I'll just throw in one more here. What I find really important and what we do, big part of our job as a psychologists is to actually listen
Right.
to clients. Big part of therapeutic process is not in us providing solutions or even asking smart questions. It's actually just listening.
Right.
So what's important is to add to the prompt a part where you're telling AI, listen to me, ask follow-up questions, ask clarifying questions,
Yeah.
facilitate my own exploration before providing any advice, recommendations, or solutions. So, and that's very important because quite often one of the worst experiences folks have with AI when they use it as a self-help tool is that you give a very generic question to AI and it comes with five solutions and a concrete plan without
Right.
having any idea about your circumstances, what you're looking for. That's not therapeutic. That is not helpful. This will just make you feel even more frustrated and disappointed. Right. So,
And I actually remember in some of the episodes when either Herrick and I were kind of the test subjects and we were testing the prompt, I remember being like, "Oh my god, it actually listened and it feels so good." Like, it just empathized and
It
acknowledged
does it
my
really well.
situation, and I being like, "Okay, I don't even need to go much further. Like, this already just feels like somebody heard me."
Mhm.
So, that is really, really powerful.
mhm. On the other hand, we asked it to provide the feedback or even suggestions in a very tentative way.
Right,
Yep.
right.
When the
Mhm.
suggestions, interpretations, so not to sound as certain as AI sometimes can certain.
Of course.
Very important.
Okay, so now that we've looked back, what's next? What are we doing, guys? Season 2, back in
Oh,
fall.
so many ideas, so many directions to explore. I think for me, the most challenging part of this first season was actually deciding how to prioritize and what to talk about first,
Mhm.
because there is so many topics already lined up for season two. First of all, attachment and quote unquote therapeutic alliance folks develop with their chatbots.
Thoughts, yeah.
Right.
Pros and cons of this, and it's not necessarily all negative. I'll give a sneak peek preview here, but lots of concerns here and lots of considerations for this,
Right.
right? children and teens using AI for
Mhm.
emotional support. Huge reality. We shared some of the stats. I mean, young folks forming romantic relationships with AI. Sometimes these are their first relationships. What is the potential impact on their future attachment style if they're falling in love with somebody who
Mhm,
is
mm.
so sycophantic, for example?
Isn't that
So
the plot of
exploring those issues.
Of a
wasn't
movie?
that the plot of the movie Her?
Yeah, except he wasn't a teenager.
That's
He
true.
was
He did fall in love.
definitely not a teenager.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Great movie if you haven't seen it,
Great
by the way.
movie.
Yeah.
Great movie, way
Very
ahead of its time.
futuristic back then,
Mhm,
not as much
mhm.
in today's reality.
Alright, so I
Right.
derailed you. What other topics did you have in mind?
So trauma, talking about how it can be helpful, especially in conjunction with the in-person therapy in healing or working on trauma and complex trauma and PTSD. So these are some of the topics that are coming up for me. One more, I guess, that I'm really excited about that I'm playing with a lot is how to decide which platform to use.
Mm,
Is it ChatGPT by OpenAI, or is it Anthropic, or is it Gemini?
right,
Kind of, is it actually good idea or not to be moving between platforms or having a few different chatbots for different types of support? So, which platforms are safer? How to decide what might be the criteria? And I guess finally, another topic that maybe we can even start with is folks are asking a lot of questions about the continuity because most of the prompts and situations we've discussed in this season have to deal with the sort of standalone issues. We made them sort of took them out of context because mostly of the safety concerns, because of privacy and stuff. But there are also a lot of benefits of your agentic AI actually knowing about your life and the context of your life, and
yeah.
when you don't have to re-educate it every time.
Mhm, mhm.
So that type of continuity and availability, it's so talking about pros and cons and different considerations for those. This is just
Totally.
coming up for me.
I think we talked about it, but we also have some interest looking in deeper on the technical side, just to kind of understand a little bit more of things like, hey, there's all these models around. How do they actually get trained on emotional content?
Right.
Mhm.
And what happens to the conversations you have with AI? Because as you know, and if you've heard the news and everything, like privacy implications are being more widespread and they're getting bigger and scarier, to be honest. So we want to keep everyone a bit more informed on that one.
Right, right. And we'll do probably more bonus episodes around, like, what's the news roundup, on topics like a few days ago, you heard there was a bill that was passed in Canada, right? Around an age ban and restrictions for how youths and minors use social media and
Right.
AI, right? So that will probably be a big topic.
How's it going to
How
affect
it's
them?
gonna pan out, right?
We don't
So
know
we're
yet.
all closely watching. But yeah, lots of stuff lined up. I mean, I think with Nate's lineup, I don't think we have anything else to fit in there, but
We'll try to slip something in.
but of course,
I'm open to negotiation.
yeah, and of course we wanna hear from you too, Nate. I think you're always interested to hear what topics people would find most
100%.
useful, right? Okay, well, thank you for being here. Thank you for wrapping this up with us. It literally started as 3 family members arguing, well, debating, I was
Discussing.
discussing AI at the dinner table, and somehow we're here doing season finale. Still shocked. As I said, we'll take a break for the summer so we can all enjoy the weather and spend time with each other. But yeah, until then, use the tools, write to us, comment, send your suggestions. Remember to not always listen to AI. That's a big takeaway from this one. And we will see you in the fall.
Thank you so much for giving it a listen.
Exactly.
All right.
Enjoy
Thank
your
you.
summer, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Just a quick reminder before you go. Please remember this episode is educational and not a substitute for professional care, and listening does not create a therapist client relationship. If you are in immediate danger or at risk of harming yourself or someone else, please call your local emergency number right away or contact a crisis line right now. All right, we'll see you in the next episode.